The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Afghan mountains as Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes. His hands were steady, but something felt different about today's mission. The intel had been sketchy at best, and the enemy position they were meant to neutralize had been quiet for too long. Marcus had been a Navy SEAL for 8 years, long enough to know when something didn't add up. The target compound sat nestled between two ridges, a perfect bottleneck that should have been crawling with insurgents. Instead, it looked abandoned, almost too clean. His team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, had voiced similar concerns during the briefing, but orders were orders. The team of 6 SEALs had been moving through the mountains since before dawn, following a route that would position them on the western ridge overlooking the compound. Marcus carried his trusted Mk-11 sniper rifle, though today he was assigned as support rather than primary sniper. That honor belonged to Petty Officer First Class David Rodriguez, a younger but incredibly talented marksman who had joined the team 6 months earlier. Rodriguez was positioned 50 meters ahead, his Barrett .50 caliber rifle trained on the compound's main building. Marcus had worked with many snipers over the years, but Rodriguez had an almost supernatural ability to read wind patterns and adjust for the slightest environmental changes. The kid was good, maybe even better than Marcus had been at that age. As they settled into their positions, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The mountains had a way of playing tricks on your mind, creating shadows where there shouldn't be any and amplifying sounds that might just be the wind. But this felt different. This felt like crosshairs on the back of his neck. The radio crackled to life in his earpiece. "Overwatch 1, this is base. We have confirmation of high-value target entering the compound. Prepare for engagement on my mark." Marcus peered through his scope at the building below. Sure enough, figures were moving inside what had appeared to be an empty structure. The intelligence had been accurate after all. He could see Rodriguez adjusting his position slightly, preparing for what would likely be a challenging shot given the distance and elevation. "Copy that, base. Target acquired." Rodriguez's voice came through the comm, calm and professional. Marcus swept his scope across the surrounding area, looking for any signs of enemy snipers or ambush positions. The mountains were full of hiding spots, caves and rock formations that could conceal an entire squad if they knew what they were doing. His job was to watch Rodriguez's back and provide covering fire if things went sideways. Minutes passed like hours. The tension was building, that familiar feeling before contact that every soldier knew. Marcus had learned to use that tension, to channel it into focus and precision. Today felt different, though. Today felt like the calm before a storm that was going to be bigger than anyone expected. The compound below showed more signs of life now. Marcus counted at least 8 figures moving between buildings, all of them armed. This wasn't just a safe house or meeting point. This was an active stronghold, and they had walked right into its crosshairs. "Movement on the eastern ridge," whispered Corpsman Second Class Tommy Park through the radio. He was positioned with the rest of the team, providing security for the sniper positions. "Looks like we've got company." Marcus immediately swung his scope toward the eastern ridge. At first, he saw nothing but rocks and scrub vegetation. Then a glint of metal caught his eye. Someone was up there, someone with a rifle of their own. The realization hit him like ice water in his veins. They weren't hunting. They were the ones being hunted. "Rodriguez, we've got eyes on us from the east," Marcus whispered into his radio. "Multiple positions." "Copy that. Still have the shot on primary target." "Waiting for green light." Marcus could hear the conflict in Rodriguez's voice. The mission was to eliminate the high-value target, but now they were potentially walking into an ambush. The smart play would be to abort and call in air support, but air support was 30 minutes out at best. The radio crackled again. "All units, this is base. Intel indicates target will be mobile in approximately 2 minutes. This is our window. Overwatch 1, you are cleared hot." Rodriguez didn't respond immediately. Marcus could see him through his scope, perfectly still, finger on the trigger. The shot was there, clean and simple, but taking it would expose their position to every enemy sniper on the mountain. "Taking the shot," Rodriguez finally whispered. The sound of the Barrett echoed across the valley like thunder. Marcus immediately saw the impact through his scope. Rodriguez had made a perfect shot from over 800 meters. But before he could even congratulate his teammate, the mountainside erupted in gunfire. Muzzle flashes appeared from at least 6 different positions on the eastern ridge. The enemy had been waiting for them to reveal their location, and now they were trapped on the western slope with limited cover and a long way to go before they could reach extraction. "Contact! Contact!" Sullivan's voice cut through the radio chatter. "All units fall back to Rally Point Alpha. Move now!" Marcus began gathering his gear, but kept his rifle trained on the eastern positions. Rodriguez was already moving. His Barrett slung across his back as he bounded from rock to rock with the fluid motion of someone who had done this countless times before. That's when Marcus saw the shooter. High up on the eastern ridge, almost hidden among the rocks, a figure was taking aim with what looked like a Soviet-era Dragunov rifle. The angle was perfect for a shot at Rodriguez, who was exposed as he moved between cover positions. Marcus didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger of his MK-11, sending a round across the valley. The enemy sniper jerked backward and disappeared behind the rocks. It was a good shot, maybe even a killing shot. But Marcus couldn't be sure. "Nice shooting," Rodriguez called out as he reached better cover. "That bastard had me dead to rights." But even as his teammate thanked him, Marcus was already scanning for the next threat. The mountainside was alive with enemy movement now, and they were still a long way from safety. The mission had been a success, but getting home was going to be the real challenge. As the team began their fighting withdrawal down the western slope, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. The enemy had known they were coming, had been prepared for them. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a carefully planned trap, and they had walked right into it. The question that haunted him as bullets whined overhead was simple. How had the enemy known exactly where they would be? The extraction helicopter wasn't coming. Marcus pressed himself against the cold rock as another volley of bullets sparked off the stone inches from his head. The radio had gone silent 20 minutes ago, right after Lieutenant Commander Sullivan had called in their position and requested immediate extraction. Now they were on their own, 6 Navy SEALs against what appeared to be an entire mountain full of insurgents. Rodriguez crawled over to Marcus's position, his face grim beneath the camouflage paint. "Chen, we've got a problem. I count at least 20 muzzle flashes from 3 different directions. They're trying to box us in." Marcus nodded, keeping his eyes on the ridgeline through his scope. The enemy was good, better organized than the usual insurgent groups they encountered. Someone with military training was coordinating this ambush, someone who understood tactics and terrain. "Where's Sullivan?" Marcus asked, scanning the area for their team leader. "Pinned down about 30 meters south with Park and Williams. Morrison's hit, took one in the shoulder, but he's still fighting." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Morrison was their medic, and if he was wounded, their options for treating casualties were severely limited. Marcus made a quick calculation in his head. They had enough ammunition for maybe another hour of sustained fighting, less if the enemy kept up this intensity. A new voice crackled through their radio, speaking accented English. "American soldiers, you are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to international law." Rodriguez looked at Marcus with dark eyes. They both knew what international law meant to these fighters. The videos that had surfaced over the years made it clear that surrender wasn't an option. Sullivan's voice came back over the radio, steady and professional despite the circumstances. "Negative. We don't surrender. All units prepare for movement to secondary extraction point." The secondary extraction point was 3 kilometers away across open mountain terrain. In daylight, with an organized enemy force hunting them, it might as well have been on the moon. But it was their only chance. Marcus was about to respond when he saw something that made his blood run cold. On the far ridge, barely visible through the heat shimmer, a figure was setting up what looked like a heavy sniper rifle. The distance had to be over 1,000 meters, an impossible shot for most marksmen. But the way the figure moved, the deliberate precision of every motion, told Marcus this wasn't most marksmen. "Rodriguez, we've got a problem. Professional sniper, Eastern Ridge, approximately 1,000 meters. That's not some insurgent with an old hunting rifle." Rodriguez followed Marcus's gaze and went very still. "Jesus, that's a Chaytak M200. I've only seen those in the hands of elite military units." The implications hit them both at the same time. This wasn't just an ambush by local insurgents. Someone with serious resources and training had set this trap specifically for them. But who? And how had they known the SEALs would be here? The enemy sniper was taking his time, adjusting his scope with the methodical patience of a professional. Marcus realized with growing horror that the man was setting up for a shot at Sullivan's position. At this distance, there would be no warning, no sound of the bullet until after impact. "I'm taking the shot," Marcus said, settling behind his rifle. "Chen, that's over 1,000 meters with a MK-11. That's beyond your weapon's effective range." Marcus knew Rodriguez was right. The MK-11 was an excellent rifle, but it wasn't designed for shots at this extreme range. The bullet drop would be massive, the wind drift almost impossible to calculate accurately. It was a shot that belonged to a Barrett .50 caliber, not his smaller rifle. But Rodriguez's Barrett was designed for anti-material work, not the precision shooting required here. The target was human-sized, partially concealed, and the margin for error was 0. Marcus had spent years perfecting long-range shooting techniques that went beyond what the manuals taught. He had a chance, maybe the only chance Sullivan would get. "Cover me," Marcus said, settling into his shooting position. He forced everything else out of his mind. The bullets whining overhead, the radio chatter, the knowledge that his teammates' lives depended on this shot. All that existed was the scope, the target, and the space between them. Wind was coming from the southeast at approximately 8 miles per hour. He could see it in the way the sparse vegetation moved on the ridgelines. Elevation difference was roughly 200 meters, meaning he needed to aim low to compensate for the bullet's arc. Temperature was hot, which would affect the bullet's trajectory in complex ways. Marcus made his calculations, adjusted his aim point, and controlled his breathing. The enemy sniper was almost ready to take his shot. There would be no second chance. The MK-11 bucked against his shoulder. Through the scope, Marcus watched the bullet's flight path for what seemed like an eternity. At this range, it took nearly 2 seconds for the round to reach its target. The enemy sniper jerked sideways and disappeared behind the rocks. Marcus couldn't tell if it was a hit or just the man taking cover, but the immediate threat to Sullivan was eliminated. "Holy shit, Chen!" Rodriguez's voice was full of amazement. "That had to be at least 1,200 meters!" Before Marcus could respond, Sullivan's voice came through the radio with new urgency. "All units, we've got vehicles approaching from the valley floor. Looks like technical trucks with heavy weapons. We need to move now." The enemy wasn't just trying to pin them down anymore. They were bringing in the heavy firepower to finish the job. Marcus could see dust clouds in the valley below as at least 4 vehicles raced toward their position. Each one likely carried a mounted machine gun or worse. "Rodriguez, can you reach those trucks from here?" Rodriguez was already calculating angles and distances. "Negative. Too much dead space between here and there. We'd need to move to higher ground, but that would expose us to the rifle positions." They were caught in a perfect tactical nightmare. Every move that would improve their situation in one way would make it worse in another. The enemy had planned this ambush with frightening precision. That's when Marcus heard it. A sound that shouldn't have been there, coming from the wrong direction entirely. The sharp crack of a high-powered rifle, but it wasn't aimed at them. One of the enemy positions on the eastern ridge suddenly went silent. Then another crack, and a second position stopped firing. Someone else was on the mountain, someone with a rifle and the skill to use it at long range. But who? And whose side were they on? Rodriguez was staring at the eastern ridge through his binoculars, trying to spot the mystery shooter. Chen, I don't see anyone. Whoever that is, they're good. Real good. The enemy seemed just as confused as the SEALs. The organized fire that had been keeping them pinned down was becoming sporadic and unfocused. Clearly someone was picking off the insurgent positions one by one and doing it with surgical precision. Sullivan's voice came through the radio again, this time with a note of hope. Unknown shooter, if you can hear this frequency, identify yourself. The response came immediately, in clear, unaccented English. Friendlies, continue to extraction point. I'll provide overwatch. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That voice was familiar, impossibly familiar. He'd heard it before, in another place, another war. But that was impossible. The person he was thinking of had been declared killed in action 3 years ago. Rodriguez was already moving, gathering his gear and preparing to bound toward Sullivan's position. Come on, Chen. Whoever our guardian angel is, they just gave us a chance. Let's take it. But Marcus remained frozen, staring at the ridgeline where the mystery shots had come from. Because deep in his gut, he knew exactly who was up there. And that knowledge raised questions that were more terrifying than the ambush itself. How was a dead man providing overwatch for their extraction? The extraction point was a clearing barely large enough for a helicopter, surrounded by steep rocks that offered both cover and potential death traps. Marcus reached it first, his lungs burning from the kilometer sprint across broken terrain while enemy fire echoed behind them. The mysterious sniper had kept his word, systematically eliminating insurgent positions to create a corridor of escape. Rodriguez arrived seconds later, followed by Sullivan carrying Morrison, who was pale but conscious, despite the bullet wound in his shoulder. Park and Williams brought up the rear, laying down suppressing fire as they bounded from rock to rock. Head count, Sullivan ordered as they took defensive positions around the clearing. All present, Rodriguez reported. Morrison's stable. That guardian angel of ours kept the pressure off during the movement. Marcus was scanning the ridgelines through his scope, looking for any sign of their mysterious protector. The radio had been silent since that initial contact, but the sniper was still out there. Enemy positions continued to go quiet with the surgical precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Sullivan activated his GPS beacon and called for extraction. Base, this is Reaper 6. We're at secondary extraction point. Request immediate dust-off. 1 wounded, all others combat effective. The response was immediate and unwelcome. Reaper 6, negative on extraction. All aircraft grounded due to weather. Storm front moving in from the west. Earliest possible extraction is 1800 hours. Marcus looked at his watch. It was barely noon. 6 hours in this position with limited ammunition and an unknown number of insurgents hunting them was a death sentence. Guardian angel or no guardian angel? Sir, Rodriguez said quietly, we're not going to make it 6 hours. Not unless our friend up there has an unlimited supply of ammunition. That's when they heard footsteps on the rocks above them. Everyone's weapon swung toward the sound, fingers on triggers, until a familiar voice called out, Easy, SEALs! Friendly coming down! The figure that descended from the rocks moved with the fluid confidence of someone completely at home in hostile territory. He was dressed in local clothing, his face darkened with traditional dye, but carried a precision rifle that definitely wasn't local insurgent equipment. Marcus felt his world shift when he saw the man's face clearly. Gunnery Sergeant David Walsh, Sullivan breathed, but that's impossible. You're supposed to be dead, Walsh smiled grimly as he settled into cover beside them. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, LT, though it's been useful to let people think otherwise. Marcus stared at the man who had been his mentor 8 years earlier, who had taught him everything about long-range shooting and mountain warfare. Walsh had been declared killed in action during a classified operation in Pakistan. There had been a memorial service, a flag folded and presented to his wife. How? Marcus managed to ask. Long story, Chen. Short version is that some of us never really come back from the mountains. The war out here is bigger than what the brass back home wants to admit. There are players in this game that don't show up in intelligence briefings. Rodriguez was studying Walsh with the careful attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle. You've been operating alone for 3 years? That's impossible. No one could survive that long without support. Who says I'm alone? Walsh replied, never taking his eyes off the surrounding ridges. And who says I'm unsupported? Just because my support doesn't come from official channels doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Walsh was talking about off-the-books operations, the kind of shadow warfare that officially didn't exist, the kind that required people to be declared dead so they could operate without oversight or accountability. Sergeant, with respect, Sullivan said carefully. We need to know whose side you're on. Walsh's laugh was bitter. I'm on the side of the guys getting shot at by assholes who shouldn't be this well-equipped or well-trained. Same as always. He gestured toward the valley below, where the dust clouds from the insurgent vehicles were still visible. Those aren't your average mountain fighters down there, LT. That equipment, that coordination, that level of intelligence about your mission, someone with serious resources is backing them. What kind of resources? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he knew the answer. The kind that can track classified military operations in real time. The kind that can position professional snipers with military-grade equipment in advance of your arrival. The kind that has been using these mountains as a testing ground for new forms of asymmetric warfare. Park, who had been listening while watching their perimeter, turned toward Walsh with suspicion. And you just happened to be in the area when we needed help. Nothing about this is happening. Chen's team was targeted specifically. This whole operation was designed to field test new tactics against elite American forces. You walked into a laboratory, not a battlefield. The radio crackled with incoming transmission from base. Reaper 6, be advised. Intelligence indicates major insurgent movement in your area. Recommend immediate relocation to tertiary extraction point. Sullivan looked at Walsh questioningly. The tertiary point was 5 kilometers away, across even more difficult terrain. With Morrison wounded and enemy forces actively hunting them, it would be a nightmare march. Negative, Walsh said before Sullivan could respond. That's exactly what they want. Drive you toward the tertiary point where they've got another surprise waiting. This whole thing is choreographed. How do you know that? Rodriguez demanded. Because I've been watching them set it up for the past week. They've been moving equipment and personnel into position around all 3 extraction points. Someone gave them your complete mission profile. The silence that followed was broken by the distant sound of helicopter rotors. But instead of the familiar thump of American aircraft, this sounded different, heavier, more mechanical. Russian helicopters, Walsh said grimly. Heinz, probably. They're not here to extract anyone. Marcus felt ice in his veins as he realized the true scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just an insurgent ambush that had gotten lucky. This was a carefully planned operation involving multiple nations and resources that shouldn't exist in this theater. Walsh, he said quietly, what the hell is really going on here? The former Marine's expression was grim as he chambered around in his rifle. Chen, remember what I taught you about reading the terrain? Sometimes the most important thing isn't what you can see, but what you can't see that's still there. The enemy you can't identify is the most dangerous. Marcus recited the old lesson. Exactly. And the enemy here isn't the guys shooting at us. They're just the visible part. The real enemy is whoever put them here, whoever gave them your mission details, and whoever benefits from field testing tactics against American Special Operations Forces. The helicopter sounds were getting closer. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see 3 aircraft approaching from different directions. They're trying to box us in again. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Walsh stood up, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to create a distraction that will draw their attention away from this position. When I do, you move fast and hard toward the 4th extraction point. There is no 4th extraction point, Sullivan said. There is now. Grid coordinates 274168. There's a cave system there that connects to a valley on the other side of the mountain. I've got transportation waiting. Marcus stared at his old mentor. You're talking about abandoning an official extraction for an unknown route with an operative who's supposed to be dead. That's beyond irregular. Chen, those helicopters aren't coming to rescue you. They're coming to make sure you don't leave these mountains alive. You can trust official channels or you can trust me. Your choice. The sound of the approaching aircraft was now overwhelming. Whatever decision they made had to be made now. Rodriguez looked at Marcus, then at Sullivan. Surge. You know this guy. What's your call? Marcus thought about everything Walsh had taught him years ago. About reading terrain, about identifying threats, about trusting your instincts when everything else failed. His instincts were screaming that nothing about this mission had been what it seemed. He's right, Marcus said finally. We follow Walsh. As if summoned by his words, the first helicopter appeared over the ridge, its weapon systems already tracking toward their position. Walsh smiled grimly and raised his rifle. Then let's go remind them why they should have left us alone in the first place. The shot that followed would become legend among the few people who knew the true story of what happened in those mountains. A single round, fired by a dead man who refused to stay buried, taking out the lead helicopter's tail rotor from over 800 meters away while under fire from multiple directions. As the aircraft spun out of control and crashed into the valley below, Walsh turned to the SEALs with the same expression Marcus remembered from training exercises years earlier. Move, and try to keep up. They moved, following a ghost through mountain paths that officially didn't exist, toward an extraction that would never appear in any after-action report. Behind them, the mountains burned with the fire of a war that was bigger and more complex than anyone wanted to admit. But they were alive, and sometimes that was the only victory that mattered.